Okay, so now we're going to spend some time talking with Kevin Ford, Senior Consultant at AVPreserve. So I thought what we might do in terms of our conversation is talk a wee bit about standards, because obviously that's a big part of what you do and what you're talking about. And maybe that question, is there too much of a good thing with standards? Are there too many standards? What do you think about that?
I don't know if there are too many standards. I do think there's a tendency to think of standards as a panacea. It's a cure-all. And at the moment you have a standard, you have the solution. And what happens is that people recognize that it's not the solution and frequently go off and define another standard, which is how you have a proliferation of standards. One. Two, I think as time has progressed and technologies have developed, I think it's become easier to create your own standard and to do your own thing. Once upon a time, you had to actually get people into a room. You had to have a synchronous conversation that way. Now you can do this all by email and perhaps never meet, and yet define an entire standard and publish it, complete with documentation. So it's become much easier in that respect. But mostly I think that a lot of people think of it as a panacea, that once you have one standard, you can solve the issue. And I think what people realize is that there is no one standard that can do it. And so the best example I can bring of that is probably Mark. Although you could think of Dublin Core as kind of I'll actually use Dublin Core because I think it's more interesting. So Dublin Core is extraordinarily simple. And this is, this goes back 10, 15 years when people were doing very basic Dublin Core records. And all you had to do was enter as a text a name and a title and subjects and this and that. And what people did, institution by institution or even individual cataloger by individual cataloger, is they would enter that information differently. The same information differently. They might enter the name even at one point when they were cataloging one way, and another point when they're cataloging another way. So even though Dublin Core is extraordinarily simple, easy to implement, a de facto standard, if you will, for when it comes to a data format, when you have that type of variation, it doesn't make it usable. So is the problem the standard or what was missing? And so what was missing in that respect are content standards. And it's not any one, but it's the mix. So if they had all decided to do last name, comma, first name, or first name, space, last name, and they would have created uniformity, they would have had a stronger batch of data at the end than the variation they got. But they didn't have that problem because of a problem with the technical standard. They had that problem because they didn't implement a content or rule standard to go along with it, or they didn't take one to account when they were putting it together. And I think that that's also what happens, is people don't recognize that it's not just about the data format, but also about how you record the data and other various rules that we've set up and grown extraordinarily accustomed to.
Cool. So as part of that the weakest part of a standard is the human element?
Yes, it's absolutely the human element. In fact, I would make the argument that there's virtually no technological problem, ever. I think even the technological problems at the end of the day are human problems. By which I mean that it's the humans who choose to implement it. It's the humans who choose to follow the cataloging rules. It's the humans who make the decision about governance and consistency and implementation. They might be able to define elements of a schema that would help with validation in order to maintain a certain level of control, and they can push that work off onto computers. But at the end of the day, they need to make the decision as a group, or individually, I guess, that this is what they want to do, and then follow it. I mean, that to me is the miracle of the last 50 years of cataloging. When you look at the consistency there are problems, there will always be problems with metadata, but at the end of the day, when you look at the consistency that you can find in MARC records, that may have been created around the world by who knows how many different people, and there's still a tremendous amount of consistency, not because of some technological mechanism that was in place, but because all the humans said, we're going to do this. And they did it as uniformly as they could across the planet.
Cool. And I guess so my final question then would be, as we get smarter with programming and algorithms and things like that, do standards become less important if we can do more with computers to actually harvest that stuff in different ways?
Yes. I mean, at the end of the day, although I think every problem is at the source of probably mostly a human problem, technology should be leveraged in every corner that it can be in order to reduce the amount of work and increase the efficiency. So one of the big things with the way, of course, library data is moving and all data is moving is to make use and consistent use of identifiers versus entering information again and again and again. And that will require, once systems are built, are automated lookups. And ideally, you'll never have to enter the string. One person enters the string, and it's available for everybody. And not only will you achieve consistency in that way, and it'll be eased by the use of technology, but you will then I've lost my train of thought, frankly. But what I wanted to say on top of that was that ultimately it was a human who made the decision to do it this way, even if it became widely usable through the means of technology.
Cool. Thank you. That's 5 minutes with Kevin Ford.